Do you want them to bloom profusely, or do you want a specimen that is shaped the way you want it? And so that's where you start getting into some of these other books, like the Sunset book, and they tell you what to do. Roses is a good one. Well, what do I do with my roses, especially some of these that are rebloomers? Okay, simple. They bloomed. You want them to bloom again later in the summer or early fall. Go down to where you have the first 5-leaf branch. Cut it off right there, just above that. It'll regrow and rebloom. Send up new buds. But if you don't go that far, then you've got this stub there that's not doing you any good at all. Very simple. Well, what about in the winter? We got these roses. What do I do? Well, if it's a shrub rose or rugosa, I'll leave it alone. Shape it up a little. You got some old branches you want to get rid of them. You know, save your rose hips, make some tea or some jelly. If it's one of these reblooming nice roses that you planted as a foundation planting, cut them back about 1/3 and wait till spring. See what has survived. Yeah. Then, when they sprout in the spring, that's when you'll prune. That's when you, okay, this one didn't re-sprout at all. I'll cut it off at the base. I don't like this one. I can prune it out. This one's nice. Prune it right to where that new sprout comes so I don't have that dead stub sticking there. Okay. But I've found over the years that the roses, if I did like they told me to, cut them down to about that tall and mount a bunch of leaves and stuff over them, I lost about half of them anyway. So, okay, first of all, I found a place that's called Heirloom Roses, and they have own root roses. They're not grafted. And this is where you run into trouble in this country, is with grafted roses. They die back to the graft, and then the rootstock grows. Some of them are quite nice, actually, but not what you had planned on. So I plant those own root. They're slips that have been rooted, so they're own root roses. And then I do like I said. I cut back just below all the blooms that are done now, and I just leave it. And in the spring then, when it sprouts, I know what I'm dealing with. I can thin those out at that time, take some out completely, cut some of the others out, and start that rose all over again.
You don't mulch your roses at all then?
I don't even worry about it. They're own root. Even if they die back to the ground, the root is alive.
It's the only roses I had that lived were those kinds.
Yeah.
All the rest of them croaked after the second year.
Yeah, 1 or 2 or 3 years at the most, and you lose them. Or you get that rootstock rose.
You call them heirloom roses?
That's the name of the one company I've bought from, Heirloom Roses. You can find them online. Okay. Talk a little bit about berries real quick. I've done some classes for the Butter County Gardeners on growing berries, and ribes is one, but we're going to talk about brambles. And brambles are your raspberries, blackberries. Well, what do we do with them? How do we know? Well, if they had fruit on them this year, that cane is done. Cut it off at the ground.
Including the blackberries? The blackberries too?
Pretty much, yeah. I don't know the specific ones you've got. There's some that...
One with nasty thorns and one without.
Yeah, which one has the better fruit? The one with the nasty thorns. But as a general rule, if they had fruit on them this year, they are through. The exception are the ones that are called everbearing, and they bloom in the fall. And I've got a few of those raspberries, and they do okay. But last year I tried cutting them right off at the ground. This year they came up, they bloomed earlier. I got a fairly nice little crop off of them, and I'll cut them off at the ground again. You know, supposedly you go back behind the last blossom and prune them there, and then you get a spring crop. Well, I've got an acre and a half of raspberries. I don't really need any more spring crop. I like that fall crop, and it's iffy here, but it works well, you know, for a treat in the fall. And so with everbearing raspberries, you can, like I said, cut them off behind the last blossom in the fall, and what's left of that cane will bloom in the spring with your spring berries. Or you can cut them off at the ground, let the new cane come, and it'll bloom earlier.
What would you do if you had a 6-year-old patch that nobody had touched?
Oh, okay.
Would you just go in and cut everything off?
No, but I'm that way. What I would try to do is establish either some, they're going to be crowns. And they put out laterals which come up as suckers, and those are filled in. But you've got some crowns, and I would find some of the better crowns, and I would space them, not dig them up, but I would dig stuff out around them, space them out where I needed them, get rid of all the old canes. Some are broken off and on the ground, and it's a mess, I know. Then I would trellis them somehow, either with a post or a wire system. Actually, I've done this. About a quarter of an acre of this. I had let my old patch go for years, and then we decided to get back into the business with the farmer's market. And rather than start from scratch, we just did that. We went through, I set some posts, ran some wires, and dug out everything that wasn't under the wires. And it got us there. So, okay, you've taken out the cane that bloomed this year, bore fruit. Now you've got these other canes. Cut them off about here and tie them to something. That's all you have to do.
What about blueberries?
Blueberries, ribes, which are currants and gooseberries, they will bear for a very long time. So what you want to do, those plants are 50 to 60 year plants once they're established. But what you want to do is allow these kind of things to grow, a few of them. They're replacements. So they will do the same thing. They're going to spread out, hang down. By the third year, you take those single stems that are 3 years old and cut them off. You've got ones behind them that are coming. And you want to keep just enough to keep replacing those. Okay. And, you know, I wave my hands around, you get the image, right? You've got a crown, and it keeps wanting to grow new sprouts from it. So those new sprouts, maybe you have 5 that are bearing. Okay. They're 3 years old. You cut them off. You have 2-year-old sprouts that did some bearing, and they're starting. They will take those place. You've got 1-year-old that are starting to go. So if you've got 4 or 5 bearing sprouts, you're going to have 10 or 12 altogether in that crown, because you're growing the replacements, taking out the old ones. They reach a point where they're no longer productive, and that's why we want to take them out. And those new ones You know, again, we're going to look for the nicest, strongest ones. And the moose ate my new pear tree, but he didn't touch my currants and gooseberries. So.
Can I ask you another question? Do I have raspberries, blackberries, marionberries, blueberries, and strawberries all in the same place? Do they like each other all together there? Same kind of fertilizer, same kind of soil type?
Well, other than the blueberries.
What do the
Blueberries are going to have an acidifier.
Okay.
You can get sulfur pellets. They probably have a complete blueberry fertilizer here.
They use a rhododendron food.
Yeah, you can use rhododendron food. You can get one that says blueberry. You can go with a regular fertilizer just so long as you keep the acid level at about 4.5 to 5.
The guy that runs that blueberry farm at Laclede, he advises that you use fish-based fertilizer, the liquid, once a year.
Yeah. Yeah, they don't need a whole lot. One shot. But you do need the acid, and the other way is they have pelletized sulfur.
Okay.
And you just work that into the top layer of soil. You want to be careful working it in because they're real shallow rooted. Roots are right at the surface.
Okay.
So you just kind of scuffle it in a little bit and let it go at that.
Okay, thank you.
Pine needles?
Pine needles don't have enough acid in them to actually do it. Sawdust can be problematic. It's acid for the first year. After that, the acid is pretty much washed out, and it just becomes a mulch, and it can compact so much that you lose your water penetration.
So that's where the addition of the sulfur pellet would come in.
Yeah. And so whatever you've used, you'll get some acidification from sawdust, especially if it's the conifers and not the softwoods. And pine needles, but you're still going to have more. The reason that huckleberries and blueberries, if we look at where they grow naturally, there's more to what's developed that acid than just some needle fall. You know, there's peats, there's mountain soils, there's fairly recent rock degradation that's created these soils they grow in. So that's where we're playing with that. So the only way to get a really successful blueberry crop is to make sure that your acid level is correct. When I said fruiting spurs, see, this one was growing like this. Okay, so if this was a limb that we really wanted, it's got a nice lateral. We would have come back about a third and find a bud that's facing down or to the side, and we'd cut it off there. This one we would probably take off. We've got two laterals right here that have got fruiting spurs on them, so we might leave those. But this one is a nice lateral too. So the farther out on this branch we come, the fewer laterals we want. We want to concentrate our fruit load closer to the tree. One is just simply strength. The other is nutrients. It's got to travel. It's getting short-circuited all the way out. This is a mess out here. This one, see, is going up. And here we see one of these that was cut off before. Got about a 1-inch stub on it. Don't know how well you can see in the back. Walk back along this side. But somebody went through little clippers, clipped that water sprout off, left an inch stub. Look here, now we've got 3 water sprouts coming from the base of that. We need to do something to short circuit that. One is to cut it really close, which gets really difficult to do. The other is to rip those off initially, and that damages that node point, those latent buds, so that it won't re-sprout. May next year, but by the time we rip another one off, we're really cutting into its ability to do anything. Okay? Over here, now we see this looks entirely different. These are our fruiting spurs developing. This is what we're looking for in the long run. So we want to be careful. You know, if we've got fruiting spurs, we want to be sure that we want to take that off. If we've got a lateral like this, we cut that back to a third, cut it to one of these sides, or downward facing. And that's why we've got to come back every year, because that bud is now the leader. So it's going to try to grow into a new branch. So we're going to have to play with that. But by cutting that back and saving this, we're going to develop some fruiting spurs along it. This is out of the center of my plum tree. And so I had this little branch I thought I'd leave. It decided it needed to be a new top. So this was this year's growth right in the middle of my tree where I don't need it at all. So rather than just take it off, I needed to open up the area a little bit anyway. So I went, your history. But this is one of those that I let go last year and the year before because I thought I was going to get some good fruit production there. But then as the tree developed, it wasn't in a place that was any good to me. And then all of a sudden, it flaunts itself in my face. I'm getting rid of that sucker. Your history.